Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Tape Deck Media.
I'm Chris Chapman.
And I'm Aaron Fresquez.
I'm Joseph Beck Castro.
Cool. And together, we produce a comedy podcast about the films of Arnold Schwarzenegger called See You at the Potty, Richter.
See you at the potty, Richter. Like that. You need to say it with accent.
Yeah, come on. Don't you know accents?
That's not Arnold Schwarzenegger accent. This is a Schwarzenegger accent.
It's an accent, sure. Anyway, listen each month as we take you through Arnold's career, one movie at a time. For each movie, we'll explain the plot, discover some fascinating trivia about its production and promotion, and rate the film on its quintessential Arnoldness.
That's what we do. I mean, that's what we do.
That is Joe's accent is a lot better than my accent.
We know you have a lot of choices in the comedy deep dive into the filmography of the world's most charismatic bodybuilder genre of podcasts, but please consider giving us a shot.
Come on, do it now. Do it. Subscribe.
Ruddle me this, ruddle me that. We got the riddles that'll make you chat. Oh yeah, baseline stuff with groove is tight. Get your funk on, we're rocking tonight. One more time.
Good morning, Ruddle Maniacs. Back for another episode of Ruddle Me This podcast. I am, as always, your faithful host, Taylor Ruddle. I felt like doing a bit of a throwback podcast here. It's been a while since I've done a solo talking one, and I had a very sort of rare free weekend to myself, so I actually used this time to finish off watching the series of Cobra Kai, and I thought I would give my thoughts on that for this episode. Couple of quick plugs to get in. When this episode drops on the 10th of April at the time, it's not 100% confirmed, but I'm pretty confident that it will get confirmed, We're doing a Chuckles for Charity at the Austin Club, which is the Laugh Cellar. It's on our usual Thursday nights, which is the 10th of April. Tickets are more expensive than usual. Again, don't quite have confirmation on that, but check out either our Facebook page or the Austin Club website, and that will have all the most up-to-date information. I think they're working on a deal where you get some, maybe a wine or a drink or something with your ticket, and I believe all of the proceeds are going to go to the Cancer Society, although the comics are also going to get paid from it as well, so it's kind of a double win there. We're very happy to raise a bit of money for cancer, and then also get a little money in the pockets of the comedians. So very sustainable, hopefully. I would like to do these sort of things 2-3 times a year. So if this one works, then that is beneficial for the ecosystem, I guess. And then the following week, I have got the usual gigs to promote. All my quizzes are on every week as usual. Tuesdays at Archie Brothers and Wednesdays at Moi Moi. But on the 19th of April, this is a sentence I honestly never thought I would say. I'm going to be appearing at the Good Times Comedy Club. They've got a show on Saturday called The Big Laughs, which I believe is their kind of big dog show. So I'm going to be appearing on that, doing about 10 minutes of comedy. Go to their Facebook page. I think should have links to get tickets. It's actually a funny wee story. I was meant to make my debut there about a week ago, but due to something happening, I'm not exactly sure the details of it, they couldn't open that night. So we ended up doing the show just down the road at another venue called the Dark Room, which I've performed at a bunch of times and never had a good set at the Dark Room before. I don't seem to jive with that audience that well. But no, I had a good set there, and it was quite hilarious that my first ever gig there was not actually at the comedy club. So yes, 10th of April, fundraiser show at the Austin Club, and 19th is a big boy spot on the Saturday show. So let's get on with the main topic. Is the series, the whole series of Karate Kid and Cobra Kai. I'm not quite sure. I'll probably continue calling it Karate Kid, but just be aware it's not out of ignorance. I do know that the correct pronunciation is karate. Not to big league anybody who doesn't speak Japanese. But the reason I wanted to kind of talk about it on the podcast is because I'm pretty bad at finishing long-running TV shows. I tend to get a few seasons in and then sort of lose steam, and I either get sick of it or I kind of lose my place and I just fall off. But I'm not quite sure. I've managed to stick it out and finish the whole series of Cobra Kai, and I just finished it a few nights ago. And I had a sort of realization, a bit similar to, I don't know if you've seen this, but there is a sort of famous TikTok called the Spool of Wire TikTok, where a sort of maybe, 40 or 50-year-old guys, he's having a real contemplative moment in his backyard, and he's holding what's left of a spool of wire in his hands, and his wife comes out and asks him what's wrong, and he has this quite deep, sort of profound moment where he talks about how he first bought the spool of wire 40 years ago, and he'd been using it on and off for that 40 years, and I think he was just having this kind of, I guess he was having that realization of everything that's happened in his life in the last 40 years is all kind of connected to this spool of wire, and it's almost finished. That's kind of why he's having this moment with it. And there is some controversy about that reel, and his wife kind of makes a joke about the fact that he's wearing his New York Jets hat, and they kind of laugh, and it's kicked off this whole discussion about, this is why men don't talk about how they feel, but I don't know, you can draw your own conclusions. You're smart enough to decide how you're going to feel about that. I personally thought it was like kind of more of a sign of a good relationship that his wife would sort of make a joke about it. But I can also see why, if he's really bearing his soul there and he doesn't do it often, and then she kind of dismisses it off. I can see why you would not want to open up about anything ever again. But I had my own spool of wire moment, kind of reflecting on this series has been sort of a constant in my life for what's ended up being quite a turbulence may be the wrong word, but quite a lot of changes. The series started in 2018. I should also note, I'm going to be talking about spoilers here, so if you haven't watched it yourself, go and check it out. I think it is it's worth watching, especially if you did enjoy the first three Karate Kids, and then I never saw the new Karate Kid. I do remember watching the Jackie Chan one, but yeah, it's not my favourite. The first three I think are great. First two are excellent. Third one's okay, and then I think Cobra Kai kind of brought it back. And so yeah, the show started in 2018. I know there are kind of theories that it was actually kicked off by the TV show How I Met Your Mother, because they did an episode where Barney, they were trying to plan his perfect bachelor party, and there was a big ruse where they got Ralph Macchio, but the sort of running joke in the show is that Barney always roots for the bad guy in movies. So to him, Ralph Macchio wasn't the Karate Kid, it was William Zabka. And then there's a big reveal at the end that there's a clown that's been with them for the whole episode, and that clown has been William Zabka all along. And so there's theories floating around that was actually the real inspiration about Karate Kid Cobra Kai was to sort of tell it from Johnny's point of view. And so yeah, in 2018, this is my kind of spool of wire moment. That was the year that I first got back to New Zealand from living in Japan. I don't think I watched it in 2018 though. I think I watched it a couple of years later, because when I started, there were 2 or 3 seasons of the show already out. And I believe at that time I was living with my parents. I can't remember if I had started my previous office job or not. I think I maybe had. I seem to remember watching Cobra Kai for the first time in the bedroom at that house. So I must have been back in New Zealand. So then, yeah, if you think about 2019 to now, that's 6 years, and it's for sure been 6 very turbulent years because off the bat, 2019, 2020, that was the pandemic. And so I just sort of quit, well, not quit, I had to leave my previous job, come back to New Zealand. I got a new job, so that was all new. I'm sort of readjusting back to life in New Zealand. It was obviously great to reconnect with my friends again, and I did miss driving a little bit, all that sort of good stuff. You know, I went absolutely crazy on cheese. That was one of the things I missed. It was New Zealand cheese. And then, yeah, straight into the pandemic, we all kind of got used to working from home, social distancing, all that sort of thing. I had been running an open mic night at a local comedy venue, the Kensington Funhouse, at that point. They managed to stay open for most of the pandemic, but I think by the time the pandemic ended, they probably saw the writing on the wall that the economy wasn't going to recover that quick, and so they ended up selling the place on. I actually, thinking back now, remember talking to the owner, Julie. I don't know if Julie listens, but shout out Julie if you are listening. And there are all these kind of apartments and I don't know what they are, like little small retail spaces and that kind of thing. They were being developed across the street from the place. The area, if you know Christchurch at all, it was a street called Manchester Street, which used to be, like literally this intersection that it's on, used to be like club, where people would go clubbing. But after the earthquake happened, that basically, I don't know whether it destroyed all the buildings or they were demolished afterwards, but there was basically just an empty field across the street from the Kensington Funhouse, which is all kind of developed now. And I remember thinking, if they can just hang on for like another year, all these apartments are going to be filled, there's going to be heaps of foot traffic in the area, and like we're, 7 or 8 years later, and they're still empty. It's taken a long time to develop all of those buildings there. So I think they made the right decision to sell on, because I don't even know how much longer. I don't know anything about construction. So then we're sort of adjusting to life again. The Kensington Funhouse closed. I was kind of expecting to not have a lot of stand-up to do. But then what was really cool was, out of the wake of the Kensington closing, a bunch of other open mic nights kind of popped up. So I think we had maybe like a week off before there was already another show running weekly. They weren't they weren't well attended. They weren't kind of, I don't know, it sounds awful, but they weren't good shows. Do you know what I mean? They were comics figuring out how to run a show and how to attract audiences, and there were some rough shows, that's for sure. I suppose I can allude to, I mentioned I never thought I'd do any spots at the Old Good Times Comedy Club. I may tell the story in the future, but for now, I just didn't jive with the people running it. So I've had nothing to do with them for the whole time it's been open. So yeah, we were running these. We were sort of doing spots on these pub gigs and. Yeah, mostly pub gigs it was. And so that was in my mind, a very defined chunk of time, the sort of post-COVID. Things are open, but the economy hasn't really recovered. People had money in their pockets and they wanted to do things, but I think for the actual bars, they were really doing it tough. And then the next big transition was, I think, my RSI, tendinitis, whatever you call it, coming along, which led to me leaving my last job. That was a massive transition. Still kind of a little bit flabbergasted that I've managed to survive off the back of just doing design and podcast editing and stand-up and whatever other random little gigs people will pay me to do. I think my anniversary can't be far. I know it was the 4th of May, the Star Wars Day. It was my last ever day at the previous job. So it's about a month away at the time of this at this recording anyways. And yeah, so that was another massive change. And then we sort of chugged along for a few years. I think maybe we could consider the last year or two the time when things started to go well for me, especially with these Christopher Luxon TikToks gaining a bit of traction. At the time of this recording, I just cracked 1,000 followers on both TikTok and Instagram, which is kind of, like I've said, it's an arbitrary milestone, but I always thought if you can get to 1,000, you know, for one, you're either a very attractive lady just going about your life, or, you know, you're kind of, it feels like there's something there. Like if 1,000 people have seen my crap, my nonsense, and been like, yeah, I could I could watch this guy do more of that a little bit. I don't know. They always say with podcasts, like I think I've probably got maybe 20 dedicated listeners. Shout out to you. You guys are the ones that are holding it down. But at the same, like if I was in a room with 20 people, that's quite a lot of people. So 1,000 is massive. And yeah, so when I finished Cobra Kai the other day, it was a great way to put things into perspective as to how much how different life was when the show started. And I think one of my, I don't call this mental illness, but something I'm hoping to talk through with a therapist is the frustration of feeling stuck or feeling like I'm not progressing as fast as I want to. But I guess looking back, the whole run of this show, where I was there at least compared to now, it's a decent amount of progress. Like it's still not where I want to be, but I mean, what is that expression? Focus on the gain, not the gap, or something like that. But yeah, so when I finished, I was just kind of not overwhelmed, but I just sort of had this moment of realization, and I thought, wow, okay, so it almost felt like closing a book, maybe, and that same kind of, you know, we've all felt that feeling when you finish a great book or a series or a movie and then there's nothing left. It's that kind of melancholy. And so yeah, I wanted to talk about just my thoughts. Like that's kind of how the series, I feel like it's been running parallel to many things in my life, but I wanted to actually talk about the series as well because I do like the series a lot. I think by the end, I was definitely ready for it to be over, and I think one of my criticisms of the show, and this could be more of it says more about me, not necessarily outgrowing the show, but being a little bit old compared to the target audience maybe, is that a lot of the drama, and there's just constant bickering, and to borrow the wrestling terminology, there's constant heel and face turns, and I mean, they're all teenagers, right? So I remember what it was like being that old. Everything seems like the end of the world, and the tiniest little betrayals, or the tiniest little things seem like the biggest betrayals, and so I get that, and you know, it is a show ultimately about most of the cast are teenagers. But I guess what I mean is, like, just I don't know if I needed 15 episodes of the final season. I would have been pretty happy with maybe 10 like the rest of them had. I guess you do have to have, you know, you have to end with a flourish. You have to tie it up in a big bow. So let's talk a little bit about what I like about the series. And I think the main thing that I think they did so well, and I'll use The Matrix as an example of when this is done poorly, is I feel like, what was that? I don't even remember the name of it. The new Matrix movie. I saw it once and really didn't like it. And, you know, I loved the original trilogy when I was a kid. Used to watch that all the time as a child. Or maybe I was a little older, a tween or whatever. The thing that I felt like the series did is it took so much lore from the original movies and it expanded on them. Like it took, I guess people say this about Better Call Saul, is it turned this one throwaway line where Saul mentions a character called Lalo, and it ended up creating like probably one of the best villains we've had in TV for a long time. And I suppose that must speak to the quality of the writing of the original movies and the sort of quality of the world building that, like, even somewhat 30 years later they're still able to draw upon this massive wealth. Like they introduced a lot of stuff. Some of it felt like a little bit of an ass pull. Like they introduced the Sekai Taikai, which is fucking no character in the show pronounces that correctly. It literally just, Sekai Taikai just literally means world tournament in Japanese. Like, I don't believe anything like that was ever mentioned in the original movies. But there's so much stuff that they pulled from. Like, I do remember in the third one, they make a reference to the fact that there is kind of like a main, like, you know, if the Cobra Kai in the Valley is like a branch, there is a trunk Cobra Kai in Korea, which they expand on a whole bunch in Cobra Kai. And one thing that I quite liked about Cobra Kai is the fighting is pretty grounded for the most part. They seem to be doing legitimate techniques, but I mean, this was present in the old version as well. There's just a hint of I mean, this is probably looked at as maybe racist nowadays, but there's kind of a hint of that sort of Asian mysticism. Like, you know, the whole idea of the crane kick. I think maybe Cobra Kai, they couldn't decide whether they wanted to suggest that the crane kick genuinely was this incredible secret technique of the Miyagi-Do style. Because, like, obviously in the original movies, Miyagi refers to it as like the, you know, if do right, no can defend. But then at one point in Cobra Kai, I remember Daniel says to Johnny, like, well, the only reason that the crane kick beat you is because you ran straight into it. And like, I was fascinated to see the ways that they were adding like secret techniques into the fighting styles. Like, obviously there was the crane kick is the Miyagi one. There is also the drum technique from the second movie, which at one point, I don't know if you ever see a character doing it, but the drum technique is essentially just holding your hands together, like clasping your hands together, like interlacing your fingers, and then swaying left and right and basically just battering your opponent with your hands together, which this is a great point to put this in the Ruddleverse lore. My brother and I used to I can't believe I'm telling this story. My brother and I used to call the move where you clasp your hands together and interlace your fingers and hit someone with your hands together. We used to refer to that as the nerd smasher for some reason. So I need to actually call my brother after this and see if he remembers the nerd smasher. But yeah, the secret Miyagi technique is making the nerd smasher with your hands and just swaying. There's like a drum. I can't remember what it's called, but you kind of spin it in your fingers and it's got little beads on string, which hit, you know, as the thing spins, they whack into the drum and it makes a noise. And there's a little bit where Daniel's daughter is explaining that technique to one of the other characters. It's quite a brutal technique when you think about it. You're basically just bashing someone with both your hands together, and like the whole idea is that it's the perfect attack and defense together. So that's one of them. I don't remember if this was in the Jackie Chan Karate Kid or whether it was something that they actually showed in Cobra Kai, but I seem to remember there was another sort of crane kick variation that you could do without having an arm or something. I remember Robbie does some kind of move in one of the earlier tournaments where he gets his arm or his leg disabled and he does something. It's been a while since I've watched the first few seasons, but there was something in there. They also really play with the idea that Miyagi has that thing where he rubs his hands together and he can, I don't know, it seems like he popped Daniel's shoulder back into place. And then they really played with that in Cobra Kai. Like Daniel slapped his hands together and rubbed them together and then like called the doctor or something. It was implying that he was going to do the technique. And then later on at some point, Chosen just refers to as like heated muscle massage or something. So they were kind of, I don't think they were quite clear as to whether that was some mystical thing or whether it was just like, you know, he was giving a massage. I know the Cobra Kai had some technique. It was like a 3-hit combo where they hit them in the throat. They like knife hand chop the ribs, and then it looked like they were grabbing the person's stomach and like either pulling the skin or squeezing or something, and it seemed to be this devastating thing where, you know, the characters that it was done to, they shrieked and fell onto the ground kind of thing. It was a really violent attack. So whether that was like the Korean Cobra Kai's signature move, or their to borrow another jab, what was it, Hisatsu or whatever, your instant kill. And then like the last boss character, Wolf, he had something that was like what I like, it shows them doing like a kata before they do some of these secret techniques, which I just think it looks cool. He had some kind of kick that was like he kicked them straight in the heart or something, and he takes some guy out by giving him 2/3 power, and you can see him warming up to do this. The final fight, they tied everything up in a nice bow. The final fight turns out to be, Cobra Kai Dojo versus the Iron Dragons, who I thought they were from England, but they're from like Hong Kong or Singapore. I think it's Hong Kong. And the final point is exactly like the Karate Kid. It's Johnny squaring off against Wolf, and Wolf is doing his kata and getting ready to do this exploding heart kick. And then Johnny actually, shows character growth. He lets Wolf come to him and then counters it and gets that last point that he needed. So I definitely liked that. And I think one of the things that I lost a little bit of interest in, like I remember in the middle somewhere, I wasn't watching it like as soon as it was released because, and I think this is a curse that many shows have. Like I remember watching bits and pieces of The Mandalorian, and then like they just added Ahsoka and Luke in it at some point, and it was kind of like, like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul did this as well, where like it's a spin-off, but they can't resist putting bits of the main story in, and then it's like, oh, Gus is back and Better Call Saul. So the same thing kind of happened in Cobra Kai, where the first season, I actually really liked how they kind of made Daniel like an asshole, because it was obviously from Johnny's point of view. And like, I don't know whether they did it on purpose, but they also kind of showed how sort of pretentious Daniel had been. Like he gives away a bonsai he owns like a what do you call it, an auto car yard thing, selling cars, and like all of his commercials are, we kick the competition and we give you a bonsai. And then like I remember like his daughter dates a dude who's like, he's like racially Asian, but he's as American as they come, and Daniel serves them like sushi on the dinner, and it was like, oh, so where are you like, they just, and like when Johnny ends up in there and like Daniel's kind of giving him a hard time about it, and it's a clear that it hasn't really, he hasn't really thought about the tournament from the first movie in these 35 years, whereas it's kind of the only thing that Johnny's been thinking about this whole time. And yeah, I just thought they did a really good job of like kind of like making him kind of an asshole. And I guess they had to do that because the whole sort of arc of Daniel's character, and this is another way they showed this, just the ultimate reverence to the Mr. Miyagi character. Like I think they really, really respectfully used the character in bits and pieces. Like they didn't, they did add a little bit of extra lore in the last season, but they didn't really change much about him, like retrospectively. And I think a lot of comments I used to see online, especially on the YouTube videos, is it kind of like Cobra Kai is sort of Daniel needing to get to the level of kind of wisdom and skill that Miyagi had. I'm pretty sure actually all the actors are now older than Pat Morita was when he was first Miyagi. So that's a fascinating thing to grapple with. There are a couple of scenes in the show, like I must be getting soft as I get old, but there's a couple of scenes that really tugged on my heartstrings a bit. Like there's a scene early on where Daniel goes and visits Miyagi's grave, and he's like sitting there trimming a bonsai tree, and he's sort of just talking to, he's talking to no one, but he's talking to Miyagi. And he kind of mentions that when he was a kid, he just assumed that Miyagi had everything all figured out, and now that he's kind of in the same situation, he's wondering, did Miyagi think that he had everything figured out, or was he just better at hiding it than he was? And I believe that's a point, sort of, what do you call it, a growth point of becoming an adult, is when you realize that all the adults that were around you as a child were just sort of, they were just as clueless as you feel now. And then there's another scene, like I have never shed a tear, but it's the closest thing I've come as close as I probably will to shedding a tear watching a TV show. It's where he goes back to Okinawa, and this is the thing about, again, they're just picking bits and pieces from the old movies, like the little girl that he rescued from the typhoon in the second movie. She grows up to be like, I think she's like she runs like Toyota, or I can't remember. She something to do with cars, I think. And Daniel flies over and like meets her again, and then she has all these letters from Mr. Miyagi, and I think they were to, I can't remember what his sort of childhood sweetheart was called anymore, but he'd been writing these letters, and oh man, it's a heavy scene. Like, you have to watch it, because Miyagi's talking about how he never thought he would have a family again, but now that he's met Daniel, Daniel's kind of welcomed him into his family, and now that like Daniel has kids of his own, he feels like he's a grandfather again. And then he ends the letter with like a joke where I forget exactly what he says, but he drops this real profound statement, and then he's like, "Do you like that? I heard it in a car commercial." And like, it's just the perfect, like, the whole character of Miyagi was that like, your prejudices, you make him think he's going to be this inscrutable Asian kung fu master, but like actually he's really like with it, and he knows pop culture. Because like, there's a line that I always loved from the first Karate Kid where he asks what kind of belt Miyagi has, and he just laughs and he says, I got it from Target or whatever. I think Target or some cheap store. Daniel asks him where the cars in his yard came from, and Miyagi just says Detroit. And like, yeah, just that. If you watch nothing else but you liked the Karate Kid movies, go and watch that final letter to, I think she's called Yukie. I can't remember now, but watch the final letter, and by God, you'll feel something in that deep dark soul of yours. So a big thing that I think makes the show quite good is the character arcs. It genuinely does have some of the best character arcs in TV that I've seen. One character would be Hawk. I think, what is his name? Eli, I think, normally. He is a sort of meek, nerdy kid at the start. Well, there's two of them. There's Hawk and Dimitri, and they refer to them as the Binary Brothers. They're both hoping to go to MIT to study like robotics and AI and that kind of thing. And Eli has got the scar from, is it like cleft palate? He had that repaired or something, so he's bullied at school, and they refer to him as Lip. And through Johnny's teachings, I guess if you want a quick overview of the story, the first Karate Kid, Johnny lost to Daniel in the final round of the All Valley tournament, and basically never recovered from that. The show goes into a little bit. They finally get a redemption arc out of Johnny's sensei, Kreese. He apologizes, and they kind of expand the fact that it wasn't the fact that Johnny lost, because in the movie, he runs up to LaRusso and gives him the trophy afterwards and says, "You're all right, LaRusso." But then the second movie starts with Kreese like berating him and calling him a loser, and he breaks the trophy and throws it off, and then puts him in a chokehold and kind of, like, I think it hits him a few times. And so like they explained that like it wasn't losing that sort of fucked Johnny up, for lack of a better word. It was the fact that Kreese pretty much immediately was ready to like dismiss him off as a loser and get rid of him, and so that's why he never trusted anybody, and he didn't believe in himself and all that sort of thing, which, I mean, shit, it makes sense. They really captured that, and this is a phenomenon that I know a lot of people, well, a lot of dudes, I don't know if maybe any ladies ever experience this, but it's this weird thing of like, when you run into like an old boss that you haven't seen since you were like, I don't know, in your teens or early 20s or whatever, and even though like now there's no working relationship or anything like that. You're essentially just two unrelated adults. You still kind of, you almost like revert to the young, like the little boy that you were kind of when you were interacting with this boss. I don't know if it's the same for ladies, but it's such a weird thing. And they really captured that with Johnny and Kreese. Like Johnny, you can tell when he's around Kreese again, he still feels like he's the high school kid in front of his sensei. And so then the plot of Cobra Kai is kind of like, it skips forward about 30 years. Johnny's life is in the toilet. He's working as just like a handyman, but he can't keep a lid on his temper, and he's like famously unwoke. He says all the wrong things. I think you could probably argue he's a bit of a misogynist at the start of the series. Whereas Daniel, he's got a successful car, like massive, big, fancy car company, big mansion he lives in, happily married, 2 kids. He's living the good life, whereas Johnny kind of has nothing. Johnny has a son, but it's, an accidental son at a wedlock kind of thing. And, Robbie is the son. His life, he's just essentially a street kid. I think he does have a home, but he's just, in crime and all that kind of thing at the start. And the show sort of kicks off when Johnny gets the idea to restart the Cobra Kai dojo. I can't remember exactly why. I think just to kind of feel like his old self again. And so he has this neighbor kid in his apartment complex called Miguel, who he kind of accidentally defends Miguel from a bunch of bullies. And Miguel, that's right, Miguel wants him to train him. So then, he trains him, and then that kicks off his whole kind of like wants to be a sensei again. And so the whole kind of theme of the series is about the idea of this kind of yin-yang offense, defense kind of, you need balance between the two. Because the Miyagi-Do is what Daniel learnt from Mr. Miyagi. And the ethos of there's 2 rules for Miyagi-Do karate. First rule is something like karate should only be used as defense. Second rule is learn the first rule. And then the lines for Cobra Kai are like strike first, strike hard, no mercy, pain and fear does not exist in this dojo, Cobra Kai never dies. There's all these kind of different slogans. And so there's obviously 2 different styles of karate. The Miyagi-Do way is that whole wax on, wax off. We're going to teach you how to defend yourself first, how to block strikes, everything like that. Whereas Cobra Kai is just offense, offense, offense. A good defense is the best offense. They can't they can't hit you if their legs are broken, sort of thing. And this is sort of one of the things that they explore is the idea that Daniel and Johnny are both wrong, and they're both very block-headed, and they refuse to kind of concede that they could be wrong to each other. And it's sort of like for Daniel, it's rooted in the fact that in his mind, Miyagi-Do karate is like the best thing ever. And so he doesn't want to, I think he thinks by admitting that it's not perfect, he's somehow disrespecting Mr. Miyagi's legacy. Whereas Johnny kind of has this mindset of like, the world is not going to be nice to you. The world is a hard place. It's going to walk all over you. It's going to chew you up. It's going to spit you out. So you have to be aggressive and you have to fight back. Otherwise, you're just going to get flattened. And so like much of the series is this kind of ideological difference between Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai. They sort of expand it a little bit as well, where Kreese comes back and sort of takes over the Cobra Kai dojo, and Kreese is even more brutal because you learn about Kreese's backstory is that he was in Vietnam, and there was a thing where they were all sitting in a cage and they were basically forced to fight each other one-on-one over this big pit of snakes, which is I think where Cobra Kai name comes from. And so Kreese is even more hardline than Johnny. And I think at one point they do kind of explain that, well, Johnny, he doesn't want to go all in on Kreese's motto, but at the same time, he still wants to be more aggressive and he still wants to be like more of a badass, as he says, than Miyagi-Do. So he creates his own style called Eagle Fang, which is a hilarious name. And so for a bit, there is Miyagi-Do, Eagle Fang, and Cobra Kai all sort of competing with each other. But then eventually they sort of agree that Eagle Fang and Miyagi-Do should sort of work together and coexist. And then they kind of become one dojo, but it's under the name of Miyagi-Do. One thing they did, a big plot point is them kind of deciding what to call the dojo, and they're fighting over ideologies and everything. And then eventually Johnny concedes that he's not really married to the name Eagle Fang, so he's fine with calling it Miyagi-Do. However, they add an eagle to the back patch of the gis that the kids wear. So Miyagi-Do's gi is like a bonsai in front of the sun, and so they add an eagle flying just above the bonsai, which is just that's just a beautiful little touch there. I really like that because I unironically liked the name Eagle Fang. If I had been able to buy like big boy sizes, I would definitely have bought an Eagle Fang t-shirt. Another thing that sort of speaks to how, I guess, timeless a lot of the original movies are is that the Cobra Kai logo is pretty much unchanged from the old designs. And I think even the Miyagi-Do logo wasn't used much, but I do remember seeing the sun and the bonsai tree in the old films. And to this day, 30 years later? I can't remember when the Karate Kids came out. I just looked it up and it was 40 years later. So yeah, this Cobra Kai logo has lasted 40 years and it still looks really good. They definitely gamified the last season by adding all these new dojos in to the Sekai Taikai. There was obviously Cobra Kai. Well, there was a Korean version of Cobra Kai which had, I don't know what they are, those bar things that are on the Korean flag, had those around the snake, and then the text is changed to obviously Korean text. It looks really cool. Then you've got the Iron Dragons, which their logo is just a dragon with the Hong Kong flag above it. There was something or other Thunder from Dublin. Can't remember if they had a cool logo or not. And there was a few others, but they really gamified the last season with all these different logos. And I would not be surprised if you looked online, you could probably buy t-shirts for all of the dojos. And so back to the character arcs. This character Hawk, he's again one of Johnny's first students, and he really takes to the aggressive style, and attack first before life can kind of beat you down. And so he's one of the baddies for the first couple of seasons, and then he has this incredible face turn where they're in a big fight in the LaRusso house, and he sees Dimitri getting pummeled by a couple of Cobra Kai dudes, and I think the whole kind of episode, he's sort of been reevaluating whether he likes a lot of the company that he's keeping with the Cobra Kai. Because this is after... that's right. He likes Johnny's version of the Cobra Kai, but he doesn't really like Kreese's version. So then he joins back to the Miyagi-Do kids. And again, if you're not going to watch anything but search up clips, look up Hawk Turns Good Again. It's incredible. And then, so he sort of... the reason he calls himself Hawk, I should have mentioned that, is because he grows a mohawk, and that's kind of like to distract from his scar. Although then in one season he shaves it off, and he looks really weird without it, just having a normal haircut. And then I think he loses his confidence after that, but then he gets it back. And then the end arc is the sort of the Binary Brothers, because Dimitri starts doing karate as well. And this is another one of those weird little mysticism things they put in there. And they talk about that Dimitri's anxiety is actually meaning that he's quite perceptive as to what's going on. So he has this, he supposedly has this impenetrable defense, which I thought was quite cool. And so, the last season is they're obviously finishing high school, so they have to kind of figure out what they're doing with their life. And there's that classic... relationships are tested, and the Binary Brothers, they wanted to go to MIT, but then I think they decided that their friendship was more important, and they both ended up going to Caltech, and it was just a nice arc. I thought I was happy with where those two ended up at the end. There's obviously Daniel's arc, having to finally kind of accept that, there's always room for improvement. And I think Daniel's whole thing is that he's been so traumatized by all these encounters that he's had constantly with the Cobra Kai that he never wants to, he doesn't want to give an inch because he knows they'll take a mile. And I think the amount of times that in the series they thought Cobra Kai was done, and then only for it to suddenly spring up again and be everywhere again. And so, like Daniel's, he's just so traumatized is the word, I guess, that he just doesn't want to admit that there's room for, it's this town ain't big enough for the two of us, right? There's no, he wants there to be no Cobra Kai in the valley. So the Johnny and Daniel arc, in the last season, you discover some things about Mr. Miyagi. This was where it was a very bold move of them to do, to plant some things in his past about, there may be a hint that maybe Mr. Miyagi wasn't this perfect paragon of virtue. They talk about him robbing someone for a necklace and then fleeing. I think he was in China or something, and then he also fought in the Sekai Taikai and killed his opponent. They do backtrack on that a little bit, where they say, oh no, he was stealing back the necklace from someone. I think it was his mother, maybe. It was his mother's necklace, and it was stolen. So then he ended up stealing that back. But the whole idea is that Daniel needs to accept that Mr. Miyagi isn't perfect, and that's okay. And then I think even that helps Johnny with Kreese. I think in his mind, Kreese was this, his idol, and then to be kind of thrown away by his idol was crushing to him. But then his acceptance was Kreese is still just human. He's not. I think it was I shouldn't be as affected by this as I was. One thing I always wondered, it was never really clear. Obviously Daniel was still training throughout this time because it shows that he taught his two kids karate when they were growing up. But I don't know if it ever showed Johnny maintain. There was one thing. It was a weird suspension of disbelief that I couldn't get past. I thought, how can you not do something for 35 years? And then kind of just go back to teaching it again. So, I don't know. That was one weird thing that they didn't really explain. I have to assume he was still training in his spare time. But, it seems kind of odd. What I liked about the end of the series was that they sort of... They obviously had to get Johnny and Daniel on the same page together. But it was pretty clear they had sort of different teaching styles. One thing I really liked was the fact that, they even referenced this in an early series where if you watch the third Karate Kid, Daniel trained in the Cobra Kai dojo for a few weeks. And there was this whole series, this villain, Terry Silver, who I always thought the actor who played him, I thought it was the same guy who played the Green Power Ranger, Jason David Frank, because he had long hair and he kind of, I don't know, I don't know whether that was intentional or not. But, Daniel even mentions to his daughter that, it is alluring to be a Cobra Kai, and he knows because he was one back in the, he barely was, but that was a cool little thing they harkened back to. But then at the end, so there's this sort of convoluted thing with the Sekai Taikai where the Miyagi-Do actually gets kind of eliminated, and then through some kind of weird loophole, Kreese and Johnny make up, and then because Johnny used to be a sensei at the Cobra Kai or something, he can kind of just take over. And so the last two matches end up being these two characters, Tori and Miguel, in the Cobra Kai with Johnny as their sensei. And I have to admit, seeing them come out at the end in their black gi, the black sort of tournament Cobra Kai gi, was really cool. And then at the end, the way, like I said before, they set it up so that the ending was Johnny versus Wolf, who was the sensei of the, what were they called? The Iron Dragons. And it was that Johnny, Daniel was kind of the Miyagi in this situation, because every time they did a timeout, he would sort of be giving a pep talk to Johnny. And it was really cool that they acknowledged the fact that, like, you have to have balance. I think the first round, he was too defensive and he was losing for that. So then Daniel, basically, he sort of, I think he knew which buttons to press to get Johnny to react to what he wanted. So he basically parroted back all of the Cobra Kai things to him. He was like, does fear exist in your dojo? And he's like, no, sensei. Does pain exist in your dojo? No, sensei. And then I think he drops, he says something about stop being a little pussy and get out there, which, I think time has moved on from calling people a pussy, but, kind of the point of the series was that Johnny still calls people that. And, even though it's not really politically correct to say, but, Daniel was kind of using his own words to motivate him. So I don't feel great about that word being used as an insult, but in this context, I think it was good. And you get to see Daniel wearing the Cobra Kai gi, and his wife looks over and she's like, I like Daniel in the black gi. So that was a cool little moment that it sort of all came full circle. And I sort of got nostalgic thinking like, wow, yeah, this show, I don't think they anticipated how big this show was going to be, because it started out being produced by YouTube Red, which I think was I don't even know if you can still do YouTube Red anymore. And you sort of think, wow, from what sort of humble beginnings this show had, where it just used to be about Johnny and Miguel sort of bumbling their way through life, getting into all these fights, like outside the front. Like, the Cobra Kai dojo is just in a strip mall. And I've always thought that, I've honestly always thought one of those strip malls would be the perfect place to open a comedy club, just because of all the ample parking and it's nearby a bunch of other stuff. So I always thought that would be cool. And yeah, so the dojo was opened in a strip mall, and they used to fight all the bullies on the lawn outside the strip mall dojo. I don't know why as well, but I always had this image in my head that it's almost like my memories of the Cobra Kai dojo from the first movie were kind of wrong, because I rewatched it again and I thought this dojo is actually really really boring. It's all white and it just looks like a standard kind of martial arts dojo. And I don't know, in my head it was always dark or something. I'm not sure. It was one of those, what do they call it, the Mandela effect or something, where I think my memories of it are wrong. But yeah, anyway, just the massive sort of boom in popularity of the show. I'd be curious to see when it actually kind of took off. It was probably around season 3 or 4. I think the thing that got me into it was one of the series ends with this massive brawl at the school between all the Miyagi-Do kids and the Cobra Kai kids. And I think it was kind of shot to look like it was one take. I remember it was pretty good. It was a really cool sort of, choreography. And that was I think by the time the show ended, and again, this is 7 years, I've grown up a lot in this time. I would have been 24, 25 when it kind of came out. And I was sort of thinking about this, man, if I discovered this show when I was a teenager, when I was at the peak of my Jackie Chan movie watching kind of era, it would just be the greatest thing ever. But I think now that I'm a little older, something just having sick fight scenes is not exactly, it doesn't hit like it used to, if that makes sense. And a lot of the drama between the characters is very shallow. And so yeah, I think now that the show is done, I'm a little bit too old for it. I could be wrong there. This might just be my tastes in media have changed. But yeah, this big brawl, it's exactly the sort of thing I would have gone crazy for when I was in high school. And it ended with one of the characters getting knocked down a flight of stairs, and his back was broken. This is Miguel. He's another character that has a crazy arc as well. And I feel like maybe that popping off and kind of going viral, where people were like, "Oh my god, you got to watch this end of series brawl." I feel like I watched that before I watched any of the series, so it was kind of meaningless. I didn't know who any of the characters were, but I think that was cool enough that I went, "Yeah, I'm going to go back and watch this." And then I was definitely hooked within like, I'm pretty sure the first episode I was like hooked. Right, well, I'm coming up on an hour now, recording time. It'll probably shorten as I tidy it up a little bit, but maybe it's time to start wrapping things up. I sort of just, I don't know if this has really served any purpose. I just kind of wanted to, while it was fresh in my mind, get my thoughts out there somewhere and kind of process how I've been feeling about this big kind of change. I just sent a message to my friend before about how I think that's the thing about a TV show, right? Is you're not the same person you were when you started watching, and I think I maybe outgrew the format of Cobra Kai a little bit over the course of it, which is interesting to think about. I would say it's still worth watching though. Like the early seasons, especially where Johnny is just kind of fumbling around trying to make things work. I imagine I would relate to that a lot more now, given that I'm kind of doing the same thing with all my comedy hustle. So I'll probably at some point go back and watch season 1 and just kind of get a feel for how the show has changed. So yeah, I think that'll do. That's my thoughts on the whole series. Like the whole Karate Kid series is very near and dear to me. I think there's a kind of earnestness to them that you don't see a lot in modern movies. I remember seeing somewhere a review of Top Gun, whatever that new Top Gun Maverick or something. Apparently that movie stands out a little bit because, you know, you go to especially Hollywood stuff now, you kind of watch them and there's always this sort of like meta, it's almost like the characters are aware that they're in a movie and you have this kind of like, oh no, is this the part where we, or they're like, yeah, no, well I can just, you know, it's like you're watching movies starring characters that have grown up watching the sort of movies that they're in. And what I think I like about the old, especially, I mean, Cobra Kai definitely is very meta. Like it feels like Daniel's wife. She's the only character that kind of realizes and points out how insane this series is. Like she always referred to it as like Karate Wars. Where was I going with this? Yeah, the first 3 movies. There's just kind of an they're so not meta. They're so straightforward. I think they're definitely referencing like Rocky and stuff like that. They even had this weird bit in the last season where Daniel even blatantly said like he was inspired by the Rocky movies. But yeah, no, they're just good to watch. The old ones still hold up. I think number 1 and 2, I think they really hold up. The third one was, I don't know, there's something, I think part of the magic of the first 2 was seeing Daniel and Miyagi together. And I remember that Miyagi wasn't in the third one that much. The third one was kind of Daniel going off, he sort of goes off on his own to, you know, I guess he's at the rebellious teenager point. But I don't know, there's just sort of a coziness about the first 2 in this sort of, it's like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, right? Whenever Gandalf's around, you kind of feel safe and you feel like there's this authoritative protector figure. And I mean, you know, that's the point where the movie changes, where you go, oh shit, the kids are unsupervised, you know, when Gandalf falls into that ravine. And so I think that's what, I don't like the feeling of Miyagi not being around in the third one. And that's one thing that's fascinating about the show, is that even though Miyagi's been dead for a long time, I think in the show, you can, I mean, he's basically Daniel's father, right? Like he's his father figure for sure. And Daniel still hasn't kind of gotten over, he's moved past it, but also I think he just, I mean, as you would, he just misses having him around. Yeah, there's like a sort of a comfort, and you think like, well, nothing's going to go that wrong because Miyagi's around. And so, yeah, I don't know. That's just why the first 2 to me are quite special. I might have to go and watch the new Karate Kid. I know Miyagi is in that one, so yeah, I might have to go and check it out. Well, thank you again for listening. Let's wrap it up now. Plugs are at the start of the episode, but if you want to see more, go and follow me on TikTok and Instagram. I just cracked 1,000 downloads on 1,000 subscribers on each, excuse me. So if you follow me on one but not the other, please go and follow me on the other one. Let's see how much reach we can get everything that I'm doing this year. And hopefully by the time 26 rolls around, I will have enough Ruddle Maniacs out there to do a proper run at the Fringe festivals. But for right now, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you spending this time with me. I hope it's been a good use of your time, because you ain't getting it back no matter what. That's how time works. All right, thank you. We'll see you next time. Ruddler out. Thank you for listening to Ruddle Me This. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can find me on social media at Taylor Ruddle Comedy on all the major platforms. You can also join patreon.com/Taylor Ruddle Comedy for free, which gets you access to all sorts of extras and behind the scenes content, as well as allows you to communicate directly with me and let me know what you think of the show. Tune in again next Monday for another episode of Ruddle Me This, and until then, Ruddler out.
This has been a Tape Deck Media production. Thank you for listening.
Hey Ruddlers, I joined a group of podcasters that we are calling the Trailer Alliance, a group of podcasters that share each other's trailers at the end of the episodes and generally support each other. So at the end of each episode for the next few weeks, I'm going to be playing a trailer of one of the members of the Trailer Alliance. And here's one of them now. I hope you like it.
Are you struggling with a lack of access to captivating entertainment and media? Are you faced with constant judgment and ridicule from friends and family for your inability to respond appropriately to sensitive situations? If this sounds like you might be suffering from being emotionally dead inside. But it's not too late to make a change. One Nothing Podcast is a newly available treatment for being dead inside. Taken just once every 2 weeks, One Nothing could make a world of difference. By combining carefully measured dark humor to the amazing original formula of grisly fatalities, One Nothing Podcast has successfully entertained thousands of people suffering from death inside. And with access across all podcast platforms, treatment has never been more readily available. But don't trust my word. Here's some real-world testimonials from a few of our listeners currently undergoing treatment.
From consistent doses of One Nothing Podcast, my posture has greatly improved due to being kept on the edge of my seat.
The One Nothing Podcast comes on, everybody be like, shut the f*** up. I be quiet, but when the episode's over, I be talking again.
Oh my gosh, buddy. I used to be on so many medications for blood pressure, and then I listened to One Nothing Podcast's episode on Kitty Genovese, moved into an apartment on my own, and haven't needed it since. That one really got my blood pumping.
You know, listening to One Nothing Podcast, I'm not constipated anymore. I'm just full of shit.
So what's stopping you from great entertainment?
One Nothing Podcast is not intended for all audiences. Listeners under 18 years of age should obtain permission from your parent or guardian before downloading. Tell your therapist if you're predisposed to whining, complaining, reading podcasts poorly, being overall combative, or being easily offended, as One Nothing Podcast might not be right for you.
So stop letting great content pass you by. Talk to your therapist today to see if One Nothing Podcast is right for you.
Hey, it's Ryan Seacrest. Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time. Enter Chumba Casino. With no download required, you can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.